Welcome to another episode of Rethink Real Estate, folks. Today, closing is the topic. Now, a lot of people think that we're talking about closing out a deal or closing out at the end of the listing presentation and, what are the snappy scripts and dialogues and blah, 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 blah. The essence is we're not. We're talking about the fundamentals of how you actually get to a point of somebody saying yes to you versus that cliche terminology within the industry that is closing. I also honestly believe that if you go back to a great deal more of the training element, and certainly now with some of the newer, fresher stuff that's coming out, I feel like it's actually even leaning even more towards this whole close mentality and get people to say yes and all of that stuff. I think that realistically, forcing somebody in order to make a decision with you in the closing element only builds resentment later. You've got to remember this transaction. If we were getting them to buy I don't know, not even a car. Like if you were getting them to buy a bar of soap from you and realistically you force them into the decision, they get home and they resent that decision, that's fine because it's an individual transaction. Whereas what we're building is relationships, and the way that you are allows them to feel comfortable with you. If you are upfront in the closing element, okay, of whether it is the listing presentation, which is the context of which we speak it in today, if you are upfront at the beginning of that conversation, the very beginning of what you want that outcome to look like and what your intentions are, I believe that people feel much more comfortable and they are much more open to listening and engaging with you in a deeper sense. So hopefully today, the principles that I give you and also the philosophy, it makes sense, not to mention as well the practicality of some of these questions that you can ask at the very beginning of your listing presentation. And hopefully the principle of all of this you can take away and you can lean into in the day-to-day of your business as well. Hopefully it helps. Welcome to Rethink Real Estate. My name is Ben Brady, and this is a real estate podcast aimed to deliver sales strategies, marketing tips, and business insights from industry experts and myself to build a listing-focused business for the future. Let's get into it. Well, team, today we're going to talk about closing, and most people would think that we're going to talk about it, in the sense of that, okay, well, what are the scripts and dialogues, or what are the concepts, or what are the phrases that we ultimately use at the end of a listing presentation in order to get somebody to sign with you, or how do you close a deal, or anything along those lines. Today, we're talking about closing in the sense of listings and in a listing presentation, and most of the time, the appropriate way to close somebody is not at the end of that presentation. It's at the very beginning. So believe it or not, today what we're going to be talking about is 3 questions that is at the beginning of your listing presentation, well before you set the agenda, well before you've done anything else. And these first 3 questions really shape not only your listing presentation, but ultimately how you're going to actually close out that presentation itself. I want to start off with a little bit of philosophy that certainly I've made the mistake after as many transactions, or as many presentations as I've done in front of people. And first of all is that the biggest mistake that I made in the very first degree of all of this was not understanding this earlier. It actually frustrates me to go back and think about it, that when I was selling real estate, that if I had taken this approach, that I think that I would have gotten a lot more business, because most of the time I put it down to me being so young when I first started that people wouldn't give me the business. But I actually believe now it was just sheer aggression that essentially didn't get me the business, or learning those closing tactics that so many of the real estate coaches or so many of the sales coaches, or you're such a great closer, or bring in the closer, or that whole mentality was. It was just so wrong in every sense of the word. And realistically, I learnt this after spectating in the transition of my role from going into being my own listing agent to then being an auction procurer within a business, and then getting marketing dollars and all of those different things that I did well before we ended up in the US. And part of it was also in the US learning even deeper and really more embedding that process in place, that closing people is such a dirty word that people get really put off by it. At the end of the day, sales has a sleazy mentality in every way, shape, and form that we need to make sure that we don't actually become the cliche that everybody thinks that ultimately we are. It's funny. You actually think about different ways that people make fun of the sales industry, and then you look within the sales industry and you can understand why. And again, not only have I done lots and lots of presentations on my own, but I've done so many presentations sitting beside somebody that it actually makes you cringe when they sort of say these scripts and dialogues and these closing lines and all of this type of stuff. But again, maybe that's just because I built up a a residual of understanding it, or I built up this, I don't know what to call it, this thing within the industry where I got to see it so much that maybe it revolts me even more than what it does others, because I hear it so often that it becomes even further cliche. But getting back to the fundamental point is that sitting in a living room and actually listening to somebody try and close somebody on the spot is one of the most awkward things that I've ever seen and also heard. And again, I'm an avid believer of the fact that you have an awkward moment within any type of presentation or any moment with somebody, and certainly in the first degree of meeting them, I really truly believe that they're not going to choose you. And part of that really I found was people not framing it correctly. So if I take it back to, the traditional way of doing real estate and going through in the process of elimination and saying, hey, look, if I answer all your questions today, do you believe that this is the best way that we can move forward, or that we can move forward, even to the sense of that, hey, look, if I did charge you the same commission rate, or even if I did do this the same as the other agent that you're asking me about, would you choose me? I honestly think that cliche script is actually one which I don't see it work a lot of the time either. So where I'm getting to is that in the pre-agenda, in your listing presentation, if we were going to set the scene and we're sitting at the dining room table, and we can get to a whole nother thing around listing presentation, where you should do it and not in the lounge room and blah, 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 blah. But realistically, this is something that I want you to really focus on, guys, is that you're sitting at the dining room table, you're with your sellers, and it's just before you're setting the agenda. Obviously, you've got to thank them for the opportunity and all of that normal stuff. But I found that these three questions, I could actually get the most out of it. So, for example, if I break into role play, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, thanks again for the opportunity to sit down in front of you. And today is really a discovery mission where I need to present all of the facts in order for you to make an informed and educated decision. That's the way that I look at it. At the end of the day, I can do whatever way that you want to do this if you have a formed opinion of that. It's my job, again, just to provide you with all of that evidence so then you can make that informed decision around the way that you feel most comfortable selling your property. And your comfort is a really important part of this whole presentation today for me. So it starts off with asking three questions that sort of give me the framework to how we're going to operate this presentation, so that I know that when I leave here, I have the peace of mind that you've gotten the most out of it. First one is, what would you like to achieve out of the meeting today? Well, Ben, we would really like a good understanding of what you think the property is worth, how much you charge. Okay. I think that's fair and reasonable. No problem at all. The next question, a little bit unorthodox, but I really think it's important for me to focus on things that are important to you. Obviously, that's why I asked the first question of what you'd like to achieve out of the meeting today. But my second question is, how will you be choosing your real estate agent? Well, somebody we like, or somebody that's charging. Again, guys, if I break out of role play, somebody we like, somebody we trust, they're types of people that certainly are going to be very interested in what you have to say about the overall picture of things. If somebody comes back to you and says how much you charge or what you think my home is worth, very financially driven. So these questions are not only me getting an understanding of ultimately what I need to focus on in the listing presentation, because I have a canned listing presentation, but realistically there's parts of it that you focus on more based on the answer to these questions. And part of it, if it's going to be price and it's going to be fees, you know that you're going to have your work cut out for you. So therefore it gives you a very clear understanding around where some focus is going to have to be and what you're going to have to defend. So how will you be choosing your real estate agent, I believe, is a very effective question. And I have to admit, about 50%, maybe even higher, most of the time people haven't even thought about that. And it's really cool to go through this discovery process with them. But again, keep in mind where we're at in this listing presentation. We've just sat down at the dining room table. You've gone and just looked around the home, and you've gone and compared your notes, and you've built rapport, and you've sat there. And essentially, you're asking these are the first questions that they've really ever interacted you with, and it gives you an opportunity to listen. It gives you an opportunity to really understand the type of person that you're dealing with, in the sense of what's important to them, because it's difficult to frame that up just from a small phone conversation or a couple of phone conversations. It's really hard to frame that up also from the perspective of over the phone, or what their expectations might be and where they're coming from. So what would you like to achieve out of today's meeting? Very simple. It might even be a little cliche. That's pretty straightforward. Second one being, how would you like to choose your real estate agent? I think that's a really important one. But the final one is where we dive into the closing element. So breaking back into role play, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, a little bit of an unorthodox question, but how would you like me to close you today? And again, guys, I'm going to break back out of role play, is that it's important that you say it that abruptly. It's not like this whole prelude to all of this. You actually say it so it surprises them. They're like, well, what do you mean? Or they're like, well, some people, there's one of two things that happens when it comes to asking curly questions. One, somebody just responds because they're fearful of the fact that they don't have an answer and they want to look more intelligent than basically they are. So they'll just respond randomly and they didn't understand the question. Second will be, I don't understand what you mean. The third element could be that they get a little bit angry if it's a weird question like this. But it's important to actually give them a little bit of shock. That shock element actually provides you with a distinct point of difference. It's one of the reasons we use auctions so much in North America, is because it gives people a point of difference. It's a shock perspective in the sense that, what do you mean? I don't need to sell my home. I'm not losing it. No. Let me explain. People often say, well, why would I use auction? Well, why wouldn't you? It's a great conversation starter, because if you say, well, why don't you just list your property traditionally? No one's asking you questions about that. Well, why don't you auction your home? Is that there's going to be questions made. And one of the big parts of our business that I really do believe is missed is ultimately airtime. You need to get more airtime with people in order for them to feel comfortable with who you are and give them the confidence that you know what you're doing. You know your shit. That's an opportunity. So again, breaking back into this is that, Mr. Masello, a little bit of an unorthodox question is that, how would you like me to close you today? Well, Bernard, what do you mean? Close us? Mr. Masello, I think that the reason I asked this question up front is because I want to avoid an awkward interaction at the end of this presentation. One of the big misconceptions in all sales is that the fact that I need to leave here today closing you with the document signed, otherwise ultimately I'm a failure. But I wanted to make sure right now that in the essence of making sure that you feel completely comfortable, we decided at the beginning how we're going to end this meeting. If I give you all of the information today, you're ready to make a decision. But if you're not, that's fine. I need to make sure that today my primary role is to impress you enough that if you even sleep on it, that then I'm still the best in the morning as well. So how would you like this meeting to close out today? It's so interesting that when you have this conversation, you can be as upfront, and hiding out in the open is one of the terms that I love to say. Hide out in the open is that, tell them that, this tactic is something that every salesperson get taught. Maybe you might even want to add in there, guys, is that well, people have probably tried to close you already. And they're like, oh yeah, or the other opposite would have happened. They probably didn't even try at all and just said, well, I'll wait to hear from you. I really do believe that this is about making sure that we're as upfront as possible. I'm here to get you business, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. I don't want to create an awkward moment at the end of the presentation to unwind all the good work that I hopefully do today. So I want to make sure that there's no awkward transition out the front door. How would you like this meeting to close out today? Making a decision, not making a decision, what would you like? And you guys are going to get 99% of people that are going to say, I want to sleep on it, which is okay, guys. I really do believe it is okay. I believe in this moment right now, with me being upfront, I am closing them. If you really need the terminology to shape your ego, then you're closing them right now by being upfront. Hey, look, I need to know that I need to do a good enough job today that even if I'm the right person now, that means I will be the right person if you sleep on it overnight. It really doesn't bother me if you need some time to take this decision. It's a big decision. I don't take it lightly. Okay, I'm not going to be flippant or blasé about it. So guys, hopefully that gives you a bit of perspective, but I'm going to go back and I'm going to break it down in one transition from a role play perspective so that you can see it. So breaking into role play, I'm at the dining room table to set the scene. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, thank you so much for the opportunity to sit down in front of you today. There's no question that this is what I love to do, is see people's homes, get to know you, and help you achieve where you want to go. But primarily, I want to give you a description of what my role is today. My role is ultimately to give you all the education that you need in the arena of real estate and how you can sell your property for you to make an informed and educated decision. I just need you to know up front that I can do real estate any which way that makes you feel comfortable. But today is about giving you all of that information. So with that said, in order to frame this meeting and to set this up appropriately and for me to set a really good agenda that's precise to what you need, I'd like to ask just a couple of questions in the beginning to get an understanding. Is that okay? Yeah, that's fine. Excellent. First one is, what would you like to achieve out of today's meeting? Well, we'd like a good understanding of what you think the home is worth, Ben. Okay, great, excellent. Is there anything else that's important to you in today's meeting? Well, how will you be marketing the property? What fees you charge? Okay. No. Hey, that's really fair. Really fair. Is there anything else that you can think of? Just so that you know your answers, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, do not determine what we go through today entirely. I'll make sure that I prompt you the whole way through and give you stuff that I think you should know as well. So is there anything else? No, I think that's it. Okay, great. Excellent. So the next question, how will you be choosing your real estate agent? I don't know. We really haven't thought about that. Okay. Well, maybe we could have a bit of a think together now. Like, what are the most important things to you when you're working with somebody? Well, that we trust them, or that we think that we're getting a good deal, or that we think that they're going to do a good job for us. Okay. Well, they're all important things. Is there anything in particular that you haven't liked so far from anybody that you've met? Well, no, not necessarily. There's just certain people we didn't get along with, or okay, great. No, now that's okay. So we're just looking for somebody you trust and somebody that ultimately you do deals with. Can I ask a quick follow up question to all of this? Is fees and their opinion of price, does that really matter to you? Oh, of course it does. Okay, all right. Just want to, hey, look, I really want to be upfront here. Great. Final question that I'll ask though, in the framing of getting all this done, how would you like me to close you today? A little unorthodox, I know. What do you mean, Ben? Well, when I say how would you like me to close you today, it's an important thing that you understand is that I believe that in real estate and certainly the sales industry that people have been taught wrong is that, if I walk back into my real estate office after this appointment today and I don't have a signed listing agreement, then basically I've failed. And in essence is that the closing mentality of the sales industry, that closer or that person that can close people on the spot, I've only ever found that forcing things to happen has created animosity and resentment later. So today, my job is to impress you. There's no question about that. But it's also to make sure that you feel completely comfortable. And I think that your level of comfort is completely parallel with me making sure that I ask you up front how you'd like to close out this meeting. Now, whether that's making a decision today, if everything feels right, or whether you definitely want to sleep on it, let's make a decision now on how you'd like to proceed forward after the meeting, because I really don't want a forceful or awkward moment at the end of this to unravel all of the good work that I hopefully do in this presentation. So how would you guys like to close the meeting out? Well, I think we would really like to digest and make a decision after. So we'd definitely like to sleep on it. Great. No problem at all. Look, my job today is to make sure that if I'm the most impressive by the end of this, that means that, a few days, hopefully I age like good wine and I get better over a few days, because if I'm the best now, I should definitely still be the best in the morning as well. So I get that completely. And I'm really glad that we've been upfront with each other about that now. So, guys, I know that was a little more long-winded, that dialogue, but I want you to play with it. I was just doing it in my own head, is that, asking questions, how you'd be choosing a real estate agent? Well, we don't really know. It's like, well, did you not like anybody so far? And what did they do to not make you like? Like, again, it's like asking different questions, like be really curious in that sense, because now they're giving you basically the keys to the kingdom in the sense of this is what's happened so far that we didn't like. Guys, I hope that this makes sense to you, because I just don't believe closing is the right terminology. At the end of the day, it's funny as I've done more and more of this in so many different places now. It's funny that people think that the best people are so scripted and they've got everything lined up. They know what to do in a situation. Yes, there's no question. The cadence of volume of deal definitely gets you to a perspective that you know what to do and you know how to read. But a lot of the times in the right negotiation to close a deal, it's simply just understanding and feeling the environment that you're in and understanding the people on the other side of that transaction. And I can tell you right now is that if you make them feel comfortable up front and you set their expectations at the very beginning of this, in the sense of how the meeting will close, you will have much more relaxed, much more open people that aren't simply trying to avoid the final part of that meeting. Have you ever been sitting down to dinner with somebody before and it just goes on too long, and all of a sudden it gets awkward, and then the check sits in the middle and who's going to pay for it? And it ruins a really good meal. It ruins a really good interaction. This can do the same thing to your listing presentation if you are not upfront about it. So What would you like to achieve out of today's meeting? How will you be choosing your real estate agent? And how would you like me to close you today? Be upfront. Hide out in the open. Hopefully this episode helps. Thanks. So about 75% of our audience hasn't liked, followed, or subscribed to our podcast. It would mean the world to us, and it would help this podcast more than you know to expand our reach if you were to like, follow, or subscribe on any of the platforms that you're watching or listening on. Thanks again.